That's why I feel like a lot of developers kind of uh, misplan, right? I feel like having someone on the marketing side at the very beginning of the game can help a lot of indie developers from crashing and burning. And I feel like yeah, every team probably is a little different, but what would you say is like a percentage would you think if you were to sit down with teams like, hey, you should probably put this aside for marketing? If I were to ask for from an investor, like 20%, 50%, like how much of a percentage from small to big, like would you suggest to
Sure.
developers out there think about this and put this aside?
I would say about half.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're going to spend on, like, say, if you spend $500,000 on a game, you need half that for your marketing budget. I think you need a minimum. I think you need a minimum of around $50,000 to $80,000. But I think, and that's not always the case. Like some games, you can get away with smaller budget. I'm not saying that you can't get away with a small budget sometimes, but I think on average, I think you should be putting half of what you spend on game development towards marketing and PR.
And when it comes to terms of this is something that I've been trying to look for, but we haven't really found, is that the traditional way of putting your product out there until it's done, right? So there are ways that I see a lot of games playing around with like crowdfunding as the game is going on and stuff like that. Just, is this a viable product from beginning to end? Will people pay for it from day one versus day, 700 after 2 years? Have you seen any fun way that developers are kind of changing how we pay for a product that fits along with this changing landscape of indie development?
No, I mean, I think there's two ways to go about it, right? You go the free to play model or the traditional model. In terms of trying to, I mean, what I see more and more is developers using crowdfunding as a proof of concept almost. A lot of the time, so they'll raise like $10,000-$15,000 for the sake of trying to prove that the game is commercially viable. I don't think there's really any massive innovations in terms of business models. I think it'll be interesting in the next like 5 to 10 years as more and more streaming models come along, where like almost like Xbox Game Pass, where you get more and more companies trying to be the Netflix of games. I think there are inherent problems with that on the technical side, but it'll be interesting to see how that business model works. I think on the PC side of things, there's not much you can do to really innovate in that business model type of way. I think all you can try and do is price the game at a level that you think is fair and that appeals to customers to pull the trigger point rather than just add it to a wish list and wait for a really deep sale. I think you've got to try and find that balance.
You touched on this point that I've been kind of curious about. The streaming side of things, I do agree with you. There's a lot of technical stuff, at least in the States, that we have market caps, which kind of refrains us from streaming all the games that we want. I mean, that alone is a problem. But like the business side of thing is something very curious. Like my best hopes with it is that the console makers or whoever that's providing the service is going to pay the fair share for indie developers to thrive, because it is very nice to kind of open up a Netflix type of menu and be exposed to games that I wouldn't normally consider, right? That's what's happening, at least with the movie model, and that is something I hope that would transfer the games. But I feel like it's a different medium. You're not investing just with certain hours of the time. You're investing days and even weeks and months to finish a game to its full satisfaction. I wonder what your general thoughts about. Are you kind of waiting and seeing? Are you hopeful, or are you just are you thinking that this is something that won't give too much of a boost for indie developers out there?
I think it's an interesting concept, right? I'm not convinced on the technical aspects yet, I think, because it's very easy to stream a movie because you're just watching it. whereas an interactive form of entertainment is much more difficult to do over the internet without operating on a local machine. And I think there's so many technical issues right now with like things like Google Stadia that I don't think it's viable yet as a mainstream solution. I think it's an interesting concept that will find a market if those technical issues get solved. I think on the business model side, I think it's, it'll be interesting to see how that works, right? Like, are they going to pay? Like, say they're going to put your game on the service for 6 months, they're going to give you X amount of money. Like, it's a potential decent revenue source, particularly for indies. But the question is, on those services are going to be heavily curated. So are indies outside of the most popular indies going to even get a look in on that service? Because though, it's not going to be like Steam. It's going to be a hand-picked service where the games are all curated very carefully because they're going to be paying for them up front, right? So it'll be interesting to see how open that is to indie developers. But I'm not convinced on the technical side of it yet. But I think if you did get the technical solved, I think one thing I don't think it will be is it's not a replacement for the way that consumers play games now. Like, I don't think a streaming service with a large library of games is going to replace Steam. I don't think it's going to replace the Xbox. I don't think it's going to replace the PS4 because gamers inherently like ownership of their titles. And they like creating their library of games. And with streaming services, you're never going to be able to do that because all you need to do is cancel your subscription and you never have access to your games again. So I think there's going to be there's going to be a market for it. I just don't think it's going to be inherently revolutionary as people think it's going to be.
I think I agree with you. I am also in the wait and see. We're about a year away from all that happening anyway. So, but